Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Tag Tuesday. Today I am doing the Divine Comedy tag. Is that what it's called? Let's see. Look on my phone here. Yes, the Divine Comedy Reader tag. This tag was created by Tom at LA Books, who is doing a massive read-along of the Divine Comedy. Not just Inferno, but Purgatorio and Paradiso as well. I think they're doing one canto. He's doing one canto every video. I have to be honest with you, I've not read the entire Divine Comedy. I don't think you have to have read the Divine Comedy and to have imbibed it fully to do this tag, and I'm hoping I can prove that to be true. So the prompts are long, and they quote from Dante, so I'm going to have little cards that come up in between so that you can read the prompt, and then I will just respond. So this prompt number one is essentially just about a master-pupil relationship. And so I went with a book I recently read, The Old Man and the Sand Eel by Will Millard, in which the author's grandfather taught him how to fish. As you may or may not know, fishing is one of my interests, one of my hobbies, and my grandfather taught me how to fish. And I thought, most of my life I thought kind of enjoyment of fishing was something my grandfather and I had in common. Something I thought he liked to do is definitely something I like to do. Only to find out 5 or 6 years ago that my grandfather really never liked fishing. He just went fishing so he could spend time with me, which was incredibly touching and yet makes my love of fishing even weirder. So a book that fired up my visual imagination. This is a book called The Turning Point by April Kingsley, The Abstract Expressionist and the Transformation of American Art. This is one of those books which, this may seem like cheating because, of course, as an art book, it actually has reproductions of artwork in it. And so that may not seem fair, that I'm using that to fire up my visual imagination because, obviously it's easy. If there are pictures in the book to fire up someone's visual imagination, but I chose this book because it made me look at art differently. I was for a long time until I was in graduate school and I did a study of abstract expressionist art history in the United States, and I read this book. Who would look at abstract expressionist paintings like Mark Rothko or Franz Klein or Jackson Pollock, and I would think, well, anybody could do that. That's not art. And this book made me kind of look at it differently, and so it kind of fired up my visual imagination by making me think about art differently and making me look at these pictures in a different way, not as, something that required necessarily a massive amount of skill, even though I promise you there's skill involved. A tremendous amount of artistic skill involved in what these people do, but in interpreting and thinking about painting a different way. Okay, so the book I've read with kind of graphic, horrific descriptions of violence or whatever that I want to choose is Destiny of the Republic by Candice Millard. This is the book about essentially the assassination of American President James Garfield, and the descriptions in it, which I will never forget, are the descriptions of how the wounds were treated and the abscesses that formed in the President Garfield's body because of doctors sticking their dirty fingers and instruments in there, and it's just gross and disgusting. And those images are ones that are really truly frozen in my brain. By the way, Candice Millard is one of my favorite working kind of popular historians. I think she's a great writer. I think she chooses interesting subjects to write about. Prompt 4 is something you would like to see adapted either into, a movie or into like a Netflix series. I'm going to go with March. I don't think this March was a graphic biography of my favorite civil rights leader and one of my personal heroes, and that's John Lewis. I don't believe these have been adapted into any kind of a movie or a Netflix series, and I think that John Lewis's life would just make a great subject for a long movie or like a biopic, or a long kind of study like in a Netflix series. So I don't have a book by my favorite pre-Christian philosopher that is Lao Tzu. I have it somewhere. I can't find it. It's just a book of numbered sayings of Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu, however you want to say it. I think it's Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher who essentially kind of laid out just kind of the basics, I think, which influenced Taoism, etc. And he was a philosopher whose little sayings were recorded sometime, I believe, in the 8th century BC. Anyway, I've always found those to be really interesting and to be really kind of direct and to the point, and sayings and writings that make you rethink some things you might have think some things differently than you might have thought before. Okay, so for a love story that I particularly loved, I chose Dear Scott, Dearest Zelda, The Letters of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Zelda Fitzgerald, which is literally a book of letters written back and forth between that husband and wife. And I think that their love story is an incredibly interesting one, and sometimes it's a beautiful one, even though I think, it's certainly not a perfect love story. And in all likelihood, Zelda cheated on Scott, and Scott, we know, cheated on Zelda. Zelda ended up dying in a fire in essentially an asylum where Scott had put her. Kind of a cautionary tale about perhaps, borderline personality and substance abuse. But I just found their story really compelling, and reading their letters back and forth to one another was just a real kind of look at their relationship. And I do believe that they truly loved one another. That didn't prevent them from oftentimes hurting one another. So a book with a protagonist who leads a group, I chose Grant and Lee, A Study in Personality and Generalship by Major General J.F.C. Fuller. This is an old book, a book I read for a graduate class about the Civil War, which essentially looks at the leadership style of the two most important generals on both sides, the North and the South, the Union and the Confederacy sides in the Civil War, and kind of reevaluates things. It's Fuller, if I'm not mistaken, who really rehabilitates Grant's reputation and argues that while most people think of Lee as the superior general, that Grant certainly was an excellent general on his own, and that perhaps his personality and his approach to the war was actually the superior one. So a book of poetry in translation, that's my favorite. I don't know if you've noticed up till now, but so far I've chosen essentially only nonfiction books. In an attempt to talk about books that I don't normally talk about on my channel, I decided just to answer all the prompts with nonfiction books. Well, poetry is not nonfiction unless we count the concrete poetry work called Transcript by Heinrich Bacher. This actually uses documents generated by various parts of the Nazi government in the creation of concentration camps and then death camps. And it chooses the words from those documents and it arranges them into what is referred to as concrete poetry. So all the words in here are actual words from documents that the Nazis generated. So in that sense, I think it fits with nonfiction. But it's an incredibly powerful look at that kind of, the banality perhaps of evil that we think about. Perhaps with or we associate with the Nazi regime and the Holocaust. How could ordinary people have gone along with this? Well, this book of poetry, of concrete poetry, uses the words of ordinary Nazi people and shows, exactly kind of how they thought about it, how they approached their job in kind of a cold and dispassionate way. So that was my choice. It was translated from the German, by the way, and the translators there were two. The translators are Patrick Greene and Vincent Kling. Anyway, just a great reading experience. something I would encourage everybody to pick up and read. So then prompt 9, we're supposed to tag people. So I'm going to tag 4 people. I don't know if these people have been tagged or not. I'm going to tag Jack, the Rambling Raconteur. I'm going to tag Amy from the Dusty Bookshelf, my Balzac reading kind of compatriot. The Bookish Bryants, I think would have some interesting answers here, and Alba, the remarkable and amazing Alba from the channel Seriella. Anyway, there you go. There's my version of the Divine Comedy Reader tag. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.